Okay, so welcome everyone to the 11th talk in the Students Colloquium series. Today we will have a special lecture because it will be a little different than the talks we have had before. The previous speakers focused on the research which they had done or are doing, but today we will hear how to prepare oneself for a life centered on research. We will be enlightened on this aspect by today's speaker, Atreya Majumdar. Atreya did his bachelor's from Presidency University, Kolkata, and then went to University of Groningen at the Netherlands for his master's program. Currently, he is a PhD student at the Center for Nanoscience and Nanotechnology in University of Paris-Saclay, working on the applications of machine learning in the field of material science. Without further delay, I would like to invite Atreya to start his talk.
Thank you, Orithro, for the introduction, and very good afternoon to all of you from India. And also, I think there are a few people who are from Europe. Today I'm going to talk about preparing for a PhD, and maybe I'll start with talking a bit about the title because I think that really sets the mood for the whole talk. And when Orithro approached me to give a talk for this nice platform, SCI-Phy, I wanted to do something a bit different because always we're talking about our research or our PhDs. But today I wanted to talk about what happens before that, before we start all those processes. And I think that is a journey in itself as how to prepare for a PhD. And while thinking about the title for this talk, I came upon this dilemma that I could have easily made my title "How to Not Prepare for a PhD," because there are really many aspects that we tend to do, but we should not. And in this talk, I will try to cover both of them as to what kind of things we should do, as well as what we should not do. And how I have constructed this presentation is there will be some overviews, some very general things about different aspects of PhD or how to start a PhD. And in the later half, it has mostly useful tips, I would say, for going through those processes, because I think in many cases we are in need of those practical tidbits much more than the overarching aspects, which we kind of maybe always know. So this is how my talk is broken down. That is, the first part is overview of what is a PhD, and the second part is more practical aspects of it. And before I start my presentation, I would start with a disclaimer that since this is a very non-academic kind of talk, so there are not many facts or figures or plots or things like this. And all the things that I'm going to say are based on my thoughts, as well as the things I gathered from discussion with other people who are doing PhDs currently or have already done a PhD. So I would really say that you should always take whatever I say with a pinch of salt and put yourself there and think from that context. So this is basically kind of guidance kind of presentation, rather than saying exactly this is right, this is wrong, things like that. This is what I feel. Okay, so this talk is about how to prepare for a PhD, but this is not the only WH question that we are going to encounter today. To come to how, we will first answer why a PhD, then what is a PhD, and even before that, where is a PhD? That is, where does it stand in our whole educational career, or in our whole, from a more holistic point of view, where does a PhD, where is a PhD located basically? So I will start from the very beginning. That is, I will start with where. So where is a PhD? And I really found a very nice infographic. And it's very popular over the internet. So maybe a lot of you know about this, but still I'm going to go through this because I find it very interesting. So imagine this circle that you are seeing here. is the entirety of human knowledge. So that's everything human beings know. And when we go to elementary school, high school, or secondary school, all this, we kind of have a very isotropic knowledge about different aspects. We learn a bit of algebra, we learn some history of our country, of the world, we learn the names of various rivers and geographical aspects. We also learn a little bit of physics as well. This is really in all direction, there is some knowledge that we are gathering. And then when we finish high school, we know a bit more. Maybe we choose science background, science specialties or humanities specialties. So we kind of have a more general overview. And then when we do a bachelor's degree, it is really in a specific subject like physics or psychology or history or literature. So we really gain a bit more knowledge in a particular directions. That is this bump. And then we do a master's degree, which is even going more, which is going even further in that direction. So this hump is now a bit more accentuated. Then when we are thinking about doing a PhD, maybe in our final year of master, we are doing a thesis, we're reading the research papers in that particular field. We are slowly exploring the boundary of human knowledge. So we are really going towards this bit, which is the boundary of all the knowledge. And this is the part where we focus at this point of time. And all our world now comes down to this. So when we start our PhD, everything basically is that boundary where we know something, we don't know something, and we're trying to push or break that boundary. And so this very, very little bump is kind of the generation of new knowledge, what we do in PhD, that is research. And this is a PhD that we are making a very, very tiny bump in the cumulative knowledge of the whole world. And when we are just at that point, our world looks quite different. Because we're really inside that part, whatever we are doing. Maybe it can be some anthropological studies of some particular race, or it can be some aspect of the standard model in physics. But our world becomes like that. But we should never forget that there is a very big picture all around us, and we have just made a very, very tiny bump in that. So that is the bigger picture. So this is where a PhD stands, like that is just pushing the boundary very tiny bit of the entirety of human knowledge. So what is a PhD? And first I will say what is not a PhD. So as shown in this very famous meme, it is not just another degree, like when you are graduating from 11th standard, 12th standard, it is not the same as going from master's to PhD. And there is also this myth that PhD gives you a lot of stress and sleepless nights and things like this. But these are not PhD. This is not PhD. This can be some bad byproducts of PhD in some particular cases, but this is not what PhD is about. And I found this picture in the, okay, so there is a chat, maybe. Yeah, so there is a line on the screen. Does anyone know how do I remove that?
It's okay that we can continue.
Okay, so I again found another image in the internet, which I found quite interesting as to depicting what a PhD is. So I think the majority of PhD is about the journey of research. And by journey of research, I mean the pushing of the boundary that I was talking about earlier in the previous slide. And that is, so from going from not knowing something to knowing something, or doing something that has not been done before. But it is also about collaborating and interacting with people. So these days, any kind of research activity is usually not done alone. Even if someone does it alone, there is a system of peer review where your peers or colleagues who are working in the same topic, they look at your work and they review it. So any kind of research endeavor is not a solitary project at all. It is always collaborative in nature. And of course, PhD is about getting the PhD degree, which is the highest academic degree in the world right now. And because after you finish a PhD, you do a postdoc or you get a job, or anything you do is more like an employee. It's not a degree anymore. And most importantly, having a good time is part of a PhD, and that is also what a PhD is about. So what is a PhD? I ask again, and now I say more practical aspects as to when we do a PhD, what are its different steps essentially. So first we start our PhD. Then after some months, we do some coursework, we finish them. Maybe we have some qualifier exam, we do them. We become more and more familiar with the topic. We read more research papers, we discuss with our supervisor, with our group mates, and we start learning about this new topic. And we continue doing this. We learn the methods as well and apply our own expertise or hard work or intelligence to produce results, which basically leads to this new knowledge. And finally, if you have done all of this well enough, you write a thesis where you summarize all the things that you have done during the years of PhD. And finally, you defend it in front of a committee and you get the PhD degree. And along the same way, you maybe publish your research work, you go to conferences in very nice places, you have some great food, you learn to make good coffee, because coffee is essential for a PhD. Just joking. And so this is what a PhD is about, basically, to push the boundary of human knowledge, as well as to develop yourself, to learn new things. So why a PhD? Why would someone want to do a PhD? So you have finished masters, you have so many options. You can start a startup, you can do a job in an industrial place, you can become a professor, you can become a teacher, but why would you do a PhD? So if I ask people who are doing already PhD the reasons for doing it, I kind of get mostly these responses. So one can be just the pursuit of knowledge. So someone is really motivated about a topic and he wants to know more, and he really wants to do research because of this, that he is after the knowledge, after the generation of new knowledge. And another possible reason can be that doing a PhD means maybe in later life we get a job after that, and that leads to stability. And also PhDs, they also pay some money, so that can give some stability in life as to transitioning from a student to an earning person. It can also be to learn new skills. For instance, if someone wants to develop his programming skills, he can do a PhD in computation. And or maybe someone wants to really tackle a hard problem and he wants to just face that challenge, he can do a PhD. And also someone can do a PhD just for fun, because yeah, it's one of the most fun things in the world, right? So my suggestion is that whatever your reason is, it must be more than or equal to 2 of these 4 different aspects. So because if you just have one motivation, you could have done something else. Like if you wanted to just pursue the knowledge aspect, you could have just went to a library and read. But if you want to do more, then you should go for a PhD. And this is the more philosophic side, I would say, of why someone would want to do a PhD. And this is my suggestion, essentially. But there can be other things that you might want to think about before starting a PhD, which I will come in later. So now coming to the how, as to how to prepare for a PhD, the actual question that I wanted to tackle today. And I come back to the same figure about how a PhD works, how the timeline of a PhD looks like. And here I have actually not talked about the thing that I wanted to talk about today, which is what happens before we start a PhD. That is how to prepare for a PhD, essentially. And the rest of this talk will be about this, as to what happens before we start a PhD. So if someone has expectations um, uh, about me being about me talking about what happens in a PhD, then probably this part is not for you. And maybe in 1 or 2 years, I can give another talk as to how to do a PhD. So here is how to prepare for a PhD. So this is now our goal, to start a PhD, and we are going back in time as to what happens before that and how to lead to that point. And where we start is start to think about doing a PhD. That is the first time we think about, okay, I will do my PhD now. Or so this can be essentially any time. It can be final years of your bachelor's, it can be final months of your master's. So this is essentially where the whole process of preparation starts. And this is really the first thing you need to do, of course, about thinking if you at all want to do a PhD or not, because that is a very interesting, important question. Because if at that point you think, okay, no, I don't want to do a PhD, then the other steps don't matter to you at all. So it's better to be very clear from the very beginning as to I really want to do a PhD or not. Okay, so thinking about doing a PhD, maybe as a PhD student, I would want to say something about PhDs. And it really boils down to a lot about how strong you are mentally and emotionally. And because I'm saying this because a lot of PhD is about grit or perseverance. That is, there will be many times you will be frustrated, you will be not having much progress. And those are the times which are the most challenging parts, I would say, of a PhD. The other parts, hardworking and intelligence, I think, at least compared to this perseverance, it matters less. So I would really ask you to ask yourself, if I have this grit or this, I can handle such situations, is it really worth it or not? Things like this. So the main questions that you have to ask yourself, are you ready for this whole challenge? And so this is not a course that you are doing for a semester. This is a real devotion for a time period of more than 3 years, which is not a very short period of time. So like in 3 or 4 years, people's life can change a lot. So if you really want to devote that time for pursuing a PhD, you have to ask yourself that question. And all of these really lead to this question, that if I'm motivated enough, that if I can really go through all those things and think about your work only. And there might be cases where your friends, maybe who has the same background as you, but they're earning more amount of money, things like that. So are you strong enough to go through that? That is the first question that you need to resolve with yourself. And that is, I think, quite important in the long run. And so basically this meme kind of summarizes what I wanted to say, is that your PhD topic should be such that even if you face lots of bad things, you still should be able to find solace there. So these deadlines, rejections, stress, and everything will come in different forms or different magnitudes. But in the end, you have to think doing a PhD would give you that solace or not. So this is kind of a soul searching part, you can say. So then once we are done and ready that we want to do a PhD, the next step is to select the topic, or what topic I want to do my PhD. This can be very different or very similar to what your master's program was in. So this is also something I want to talk about a bit. So in this case, there are three components, I would say. There is your personal interest, there is your background, what you have been trained on till then, And what are the prospects? And by prospects, I mean opportunities after PhD and things like that. So, but this is really a vague word, I think, prospect or opportunities. It also depends on the person, how he looks at those kind of things. So I will talk about the various intersections of these three aspects. So if you have all of this, if you find all of these in one particular topic, you have the interest in it, you have the necessary background, and there's a lot of prospects, and that is really the sweet spot. You really want to do a PhD there. But if you also have intersection of two, you can still do a PhD. If you have the interest and the prospects, but not the background, so you don't have a lot of the prerequisites, then you will have a very steep learning curve. So even in a normal case, you will have a very steep learning curve in PhD, but in this case, it will be a bit more because you have to learn the very basics that are necessary to understand the language of that particular topic. So this is the case, but I don't think this is a huge issue because anyway, when we're doing a PhD, we are going through new things. So in any case, we need to learn new things a lot. So this just adds to that. So I don't think if you don't have the background, it will completely deter you from that. But you should be prepared to face that steep learning curve. Say you need to learn some software package for doing some particular kind of work, you must be prepared to do that. Then if there is no prospect, you have the interest or also have the background, then there is a possibility of having a post PhD struggle as to find a job after that, maybe a postdoc or a industrial job. But I would say to look at this in a different light, as when you're doing a PhD, it's not about only learning the topic or doing research, it's also about learning some soft skills. For example, you learn to do data analysis, you learn a bit of programming, you learn how to express yourself, you learn to how to write good English, scientifically good English, you learn to give a good presentation. And these kind of skills really transfer very well to other kinds of jobs as well. So even if there is no direct prospect, you can still really go for it. And finally, you have the background and prospect, but not the interest. I don't think this kind of cases happen a lot. So I would say that I don't have much to discuss about this particular part of the intersection. So this is how I would ask you to look at this selection of topic aspect of a PhD. So I see there are some questions, or okay, should I take the questions then in the end?
Yeah, I think we should keep the Q&A session at the end.
Okay, that is good then. Okay, so this was all about selecting the topic, and next comes where do I want to do the PhD? And I think that is also an important question because how you go about the next steps really depend on this step. So that's why this is important. And I would kind of distribute this question into three parts, which I will come to shortly. And here I would like to emphasize a point that information is a very important thing when we are going about a PhD. So this information can range from information about the topic to information about the university, about the supervisor, all these things. So try to learn as much as possible about these kind of things, which will enable you to take good decisions. And also many opportunities are present outside India, which we are not aware about, which is also part of this information that I am alluding to here. And so I will first start with doing a PhD in India. So if you want to do a PhD in India, the admission process is quite straightforward. You have to clear some exams. So this GATE is wrong, so it should be GATE. So there are exams like NET or GATE, which can get you to the top the premier institutes of India. And most of the universities, I think, they take from net as well. And there are also some provisions of Inspire scholarship, fellowship, or there are some other kinds of fellowships as well, which again you need to look up and see what are the different opportunities that you have. And this is part of the whole thing that I'm saying, that this information is key. And also the information, I think in this case at least, getting the information is not that difficult. You just go to the website of the university, or you just ask someone who is from there about what exams do you need to clear, what are the prerequisites, and these sort of things. The time that is required for doing a PhD in India is somewhere between 5 to 6 years, and it also includes some coursework. But in some institute, it also takes 4 years. So it really depends upon the institute. And scholarship, if you clear this exams like NET, GET, you are already eligible for a scholarship from the government. So you don't need to worry too much about it. And also in this talk, I would like to emphasize that when we are going for a PhD anywhere, in most of the cases, I would say 95% of the cases, you don't really need to think much about the funding, because either the professor or the university already have the funding for the position. Like if there is a position available or anything, then it's always with the funding ensured. So funding is not that much of an issue in cases, although there can be some instances where this is an issue. The person will tell you that there is no funding, or we can United States of America. And for that, you need to clear a special exam, which is called this Graduate Record Examination, GRE. And that is usually comes in two flavors, which is one is general GRE, and one is your subject specific GRE. And it really depends upon, again, the university you're applying for, as to which one of them, or if both of them are needed by them or not. And this exam you have to clear and get rank and score. And depending on that score, I think different universities take students. And other than that, there is also an English language test that you have to clear, which can be, I think, IELTS or TOEFL. And that is also dependent on the country or the university, maybe. So in this case also, you can look up their university websites where all this kind of information are there. If you know someone who is already there or who has already gone through this whole process, I think they are a very good person to talk to about this thing. So in the United States, there is this thing called grad school, where the students, when they start a PhD, they kind of go through very rigorous coursework for some amount of time. And also they start interacting with the group during that time as well. We do some projects. So the actual research starts from a bit later when you start. So that's why it takes about 6 years in total. And as I mentioned about the scholarship, that it really comes with the whole thing. But in the initial days, when you are mostly attending the grad school, you need to do some teaching as well for getting the whole scholarship. But usually it's not a very big issue. And thirdly, I would like to talk about Europe, Australia, or these other countries. And here the admissions work a bit differently. So mostly there are two ways that you can get into a PhD program. So one is the way where there is already an advertised position. So there in the website of the university or the professor's own homepage, there would be this advertisement that a PhD position has opened in this topic under this professor, and you can just directly apply for it. So there's a very streamlined application procedure where you put all your things, you put your statement of purpose, you put your recommendation, your curriculum vitae and everything. And then depending on that, they process and they either take you or they don't. And another method is to directly mail the professors. So I will come to that a bit later, how to write to them and everything. But this is also a very prominent possibilities, and this is quite usual in Europe, I would say, to mail directly to professors asking about a possible position, or maybe in the near future if there is a position or not. In many cases, they even refer to other people that they know there's a position open and you can apply to this person, which happened to me basically. And also in this case, information is similar, that you talk with people, you go to the website, you go to the professor's web pages, and they usually have all this kind of information. And in many cases also, when you mail the professor, he or she can also in reply give those information. And PhDs in Europe typically take a bit less time, which can range from 3 to 4.5 years. And there's no coursework usually because it's a quite short amount of time. And it's research from the beginning to the end. And scholarship is also provided by the supervisor or the university. And in some cases, students can independently get even the scholarships. There are some industrial or government organizations who basically award this kind of scholarships. But yeah, like I said, you really need to know about them to apply. So just go forward looking for more information. So this was more or less what I wanted to talk about, the location where you want to do your PhD. So it can be all three of them, your target, or it can be only India, only Europe, only United States, whatever suits you. And the next very important step, I think, is selecting the supervisor. And I think this very nice panel from the PhD comics sums it up very well by comparing a PhD with a marriage. And there are many aspects which are kind of similar. So it means this in a very humorous way, but I think it's quite appropriate because PhD is a commitment in some form, and your supervisor is the person who is linked with the whole commitment quite a lot. So the role of the supervisor is very important, and I would say almost as important as the topic, actually, like selection of the topic, because this is the person who will get you through all those 4 to 7 years. And that is why I think selecting the right person is very important in this case. So as I mentioned here, that it's a most important person in the whole PhD, because he will groom you. He will teach you what are the correct ways to do research. He will tell you about the different opportunities after PhD. He will proofread your thesis, all these things. So, and also, of course, because you're interacting so much with the professor, compatibility matters. And that means that your work style or your interests, these must have some kind of synchronization. Although I won't say they have to be matched exactly, but it's good to have being in the same wavelength with your professor. So, and also this is an aspect I think not a lot of PhD supervisors also think like me, but I would like to think of a PhD supervisor as a colleague rather than an examiner. So usually when we are taking a course, there is this person who is a lecturer. He's also the examiner. He corrects the exams and everything. But in case of research, it's not a conventional coursework thing. There's not fixed questions and fixed answers. We have to formulate the questions ourselves and try to answer them and everything, which is an extremely difficult process. And your supervisor is there to help you. He's not there only to correct you if you do something wrong. So I would like to tell you that looking at this in this way is a good way, good thing, that your supervisor is really your colleague or your co-worker, in that sense that he or she is guiding you, helping you achieve that end. And the role of the supervisor in any kind of research project is to have the overall goal in mind always, and you are doing the actual work as to your progressing in small steps, and he is showing you the path. I think that is more or less the point of a PhD. Like he will not come to solve some bug in your code, or maybe he will not show you very small things, solve the very small things. You are there for doing that, but he will definitely help you if you have some problem understanding how these results fit in the whole picture of what you're trying to do. So this is why this is the role of the supervisor essentially. And because all of these are important, it's also good to kind of know about him, about his work style and all these kind of things. And it is always difficult when you are doing your PhD in a different institute than your master's, and you don't know the person. And if the person is in a different country, it makes it even more difficult. And I have seen many people suffer because of that, because they did not know about this person or how he works and things like that. And there is really no good solution to this. The only thing I figured can help is maybe talk to some students of this person, some PhD student or some ex-PhD student of this supervisor, and try to find out what kind, how he or she works and things like this. So again, information is the key, and you need to talk with people to know. And when you are talking about the PhD with this person, it is always a very good thing to start discussing about the expectations that he has from the project and from the student as well. Then you kind of know if this person is expecting a lot, or he is expecting reasonably, all these things. And also this is a very crucial thing to discuss, if there is a backup plan for the whole PhD, because there are so many things that can go wrong in the whole PhD process. Maybe you're working on experimental setup, and that there is some problem with it and it takes a long time to fix. Then what will you do? Is there some other backup mechanism to still finish your PhD? So these kind of things are always good to keep in mind. And another thing I would request you to not do is not to go for the fame of a supervisor, because if a person is famous does not necessarily mean he is a good supervisor and good for you precisely. So, and also many times a more famous person means he does not have that much time for the students, which is also not necessarily a good thing. So this is something I would ask you to think about a bit. So this was more or less what I wanted to say about the supervisor. And then how to contact the supervisor, because if it's outside India, it's different, I think. So in India, what you do is you apply for a particular university, you know who are there, and most cases in your topic, there won't be many people, so you have to work with that person. And maybe you, from your network, you kind of know who are working in this field and how this person are and things like this. But it becomes much more difficult if you are contacting someone who is in a different country altogether. So here are some of the suggestions that I want to give you, is to start early. So start early is a more general suggestion as to looking into this whole process as early as possible. I think people who are doing a PhD, who know really that they would do a PhD, they can start from the middle of their master's first year. I think that's a good time, or even earlier is better. But that is kind of, I think, a good time, because our ideas about what we want to do our PhD on kind of starts to build up around that time. So this is really good. And also the time when the PhD proposals and everything becomes active is, I think, around February, March, like that. So, and your session ends maybe in August or something like that, July or August. So if you do it in June or July, maybe you will find many positions are already filled. So we really have to start earlier than that. And in many cases, you will find there is an application portal. For instance, in the United States, everything I think is very organized in this way. So you go to this university, you send them some information, and there's a form and everything. And of course, like I mentioned, in many places, you already need to clear some exams to get in the university. It's not enough to just contact the supervisor. And then writing emails. That is also a very usual norm these days, mostly. And I can say for Europe very confidently about this, that writing mails to get a PhD position is usually the way to go, the only way to get a position. And even in some PhD advertisements, they say that if you're interested, you can contact this person. So you just write a mail to that person. And in this regard, one thing that you should seriously avoid is writing a general mail and sending it to different person. Because I know it takes a lot of work to mail individual professors, but it really goes very badly if you write the same email to all the professors of a particular university. And just be sure that they will definitely identify from your mail that it is kind of a general thing that you're sending to a lot of people. So make sure to not do that. And of course, when you're mailing individually, you need to do some homework about that person as to what kind of research work he's doing. And that's very normal because you are going to work with him. So you should know at least what are his research ideas or research methods that he uses. So if you're really into theory, hands-on theory, you want to do mathematical calculations, you would not like to go to the group of someone who is doing complete experimental work. So you need to know about the kind of work quite well as well. And in this regard, I will as an example, I will show the mail that I wrote to my current supervisor when I was applying for a PhD position. And I think I will highlight different parts as to what I wanted to write and what are the informations I wanted to convey, basically. So this was the whole mail, and maybe I will give you 1 or 2 minutes to read the mail, just overall, many technical details and stuff. And then I will explain the different parts of it. Yes. So I start this mail by just saying about myself and talking about the motive. Because whenever you're writing to a professor, that person is usually very busy. And if there's already the position is filled, he just reads your first line and replies to you, there is no position left or anything, or something like that. So you really want to tell about yourself and why you have mailed this person. So that is why this first sentence is quite important. So in my case, there was a PhD position advertised on the website. So I wrote that I wanted to inquire about this position in the first sentence. Then in the second paragraph, I wrote about my interest in this particular topic. And here is where this mail shows that I have really read about this person's work or how this person connects in this field and things like that. So here I mentioned the papers, the articles that I read about that this person was a part of, and how I met someone at a conference which led me to this field or led me to know about this particular supervisor. So this is the part where it says this is not a generic mail. This is really for you. And finally, if the supervisor really continues reading the mail, this is the final part where I talk in detail about me. So I start with what is my background, what kind of things I have done, what is my interest, things like that. So this is really for the detail, for the piquing the interest of the supervisor in me. And also with this mail, it's always a good idea to attach your CV, your master thesis, if that is already ready. And if you have any publications, also it's good to attach it with that so that the professor already sees some aspects related to you if he or she is interested. So I wanted to present my case as a case study to show how I approach this thing as to how to contact a professor. So yeah. And what next? So after you contact a professor, very hopefully he replies back and he says there is a position. What happens after that? So the best outcome that can happen after that is to get a PhD interview offer. So this is not an offer per se, but it's an opportunity. So first you need to prepare some recommendations and documents, which is always good to think ahead that from which people I will take the recommendation, if I have my master thesis already ready or not, and and if I need some other administrative documents, things like this. Then usually they shortlist all the candidates that have applied for that position, and maybe they have a brief interview. And if you get selected, they have further another interview. So this can actually vary a lot depending upon the supervisor. There can be only one very big interview, or there can be more than 2 interviews. It really depends a lot. So and also depends where you are. If you are in India, you're applying in Switzerland, then it happens, of course, over Skype. So you don't get the opportunity to interact with the students directly. But if you are close by, you can maybe visit the lab and things like that. And after the interview, if it's great, then you get selected and you have to apply for the visa and you start the PhD basically after that. And maybe I'll also talk a bit about what happens after the selection, and that is the next part, the post-selection preparation, which I call. And so it's the preparation is not over when you get the PhD position. There's still some aspects which I think we should think about when we are doing that. So, and I separated this in 2 aspects. One is the official part, that is really related to the place you are joining. And there's also this part which is more related to you, because you are the person who are going there to do this PhD, and you need to have some kind of preparations there as well. So for the official thing, I think the first, after the selection, the first thing which you would look into is getting the visa. If it's abroad, of course. If it's in India, there's of course no need of this. And visa is basically the permission of that country to allow you to go there. And the difficulty of getting a visa can vary quite a lot depending upon the country. So in Europe, in my experience, it is quite straightforward. And how to get this also depends on the country. Maybe you go to an embassy or a consulate. And for many countries in Europe, there is this organization called VFS, through which you get the visa. So this is something you really need to look into after you get selected. And also you need to be aware of the expenses, and that this means that you need to know how much you're getting paid for the PhD and how much is the living cost of that place. So again, information is the key, and if you know this beforehand, you can also plan better to go there, because it can even be the case that the amount they are paying might not be enough to cover the living expenses. In that case, you might have to reject that PhD position, or maybe look into other alternatives, or the possibility of doing some side jobs there as well. So that is another big aspect. And finding and confirming accommodation, this usually is a big issue outside India, because unlike India, where we have these dedicated hostels for the PhD scholars, outside India, it's much less common to have such dedicated spaces, and you really need to find the place yourself where you are going to stay. So it can be some apartments, some student residence, or any other shared facilities, other things. But you need to look into these kind of things over the internet, or maybe ask your professor for help in this regard. And this can be some amount of work as well, because we are not familiar with that country. So it's not so trivial to always get a place to live in. And of course, this is a basic requirement when you're doing a PhD, right? So yeah. And then contacting people who are there, you will get the information about all these things like living expense, how to find a house, if the house is close to my institute, or a train station, or a bus stop, and all of these things you will know from the people who are already there. And this is something one of my friends told me before I went to the Netherlands, is that when you're going abroad, and by abroad I don't only mean outside India, when you're going to a new place, you will always find very helpful people. So this is, I have found this time and again, and I've met many people who have helped me so much in everything. And I'm sure all of you will also find such people. And something also happens that when you're going somewhere, there are many people like you also there with whom you will make very easy friends. And this, when you are know, and there will be some information exchange between you, so you will learn more about the whole about the place basically. So this is something I really would like you to do, as to make friends with people who are in the same position as you. First time I went to Groningen, I met many people from different countries who are also coming out of their home for the first time. So they were quite in a similar situation as me. So the problems they faced were very similar to mine, although they were from a different country. So interacting with people is a very helpful thing, always. And finally, it's always good to know a bit about the university, the country, the city that you're going to, as well as the topic you are going to do your research on. Especially if it is something which is not your background, then you really want to know a bit at least before starting. So these are the 5 key points that I wanted to mention for the official aspects of post-selection preparations. And then there are these personal things, which I think are as important, if not more, than the official things. So first of all, learn to cook. If you're going outside India or even inside India, there are many places where there is this food system which does not work very well. So learning to cook never it becomes a extra problem. It always helps. And before preparing this talk, I was talking with many of my friends who are doing PhD, and this was one thing all of them told me, that if I learned to cook or do my household chores a bit better before, then it would have definitely made my life easier here. And this thing, I guess, is quite, it can get quite overwhelming in the beginning days, because you are managing your house, you are doing groceries, you're preparing the food, you're cooking the food, you're cleaning all the utensils, you're cleaning your house and everything. And for many of us, this is not something we do every day. So for those people, I would say that this really takes up some big portion of your energy when you are doing a PhD, which is almost always out, you're going out from your home. So these things are very important to maybe at least prepare yourself in doing, being able to do the basic things. We learn to cook some basic stuff. So these are very important indeed. Then also there comes this process of mental preparation. So you're going somewhere which is maybe they speak a different language, maybe they have very different cultures, you don't have any friends there. Things like this in the beginning is very hard, because as time goes on, all of these gradually go away. You learn the language a bit, you make new friends, and you get more familiar, of course, with the whole thing. So just know this, the beginning is the hardest, and the first maybe 1 month is the amount you have to struggle, and just be ready for that. So this mental preparation is something I really want to emphasize as well from a more personal point of view. And also spending time with family, because it can happen that you won't see your family for a long time, because you're going for a particular program, you might not be able to leave anytime you want. So it's of course good to spend time with family. And finally, it's extremely important to learn to manage yourself, because as I mentioned, that the journey of PhD is very different from doing a course, getting a good grade, kind of going to the next semester like that. It's quite different, and it has significant amount of mental toll. So you really need to prepare yourself for those kind of things as well. So this was the post-selection preparation, and with all of the equipped with all of these aspects, I hope you would be ready to start a PhD. And finally, welcome to a PhD after all the steps have been done. And I would like to finish with just saying what to expect from a PhD and what not to expect, because expectations are very important, as that they kind of dictate what our impression would be about some things. So what to expect? Expect to learn many new things. So this can range from learning a new topic, some new methods, to also learning to maybe cook a new dish of that country. So you will definitely learn many new things. And this can also be learning new things about yourself, because when you're coming in a different environment, your different aspects might come forward. And that is also a very good revelation. You will also learn to interact with people, collaborate with people. So as I mentioned, that research work mostly is very collaborative these days. So it's not only your supervisor and you, it can be other people, it can be some person who has read your work and wants to add something to it. And it can even be some person from maybe the other side of your university. They have some comments on it. It can really vary a lot, but be sure that you will interact with a lot of people. And also presenting your work, like I said, at the end of your PhD, you defend your thesis. That is where you kind of present your work in some form or another. So this is also, the PhD journey is also learning to present what you have done. So someone once told me the journey of PhD is learning to give presentations ranging from 5 minutes to 1 hour. So I really found that quote quite interesting. So this is also a good aspect of doing a PhD, or learning to present. And also you will learn to manage time better, and also you will manage yourself better. And by that I mean that since this PhD process is not so trivial, you will have many issues with it. And to get around this, you need to really be efficient with time. You will learn how to use your time most efficiently and all these things. And also in this respect, I would say, like, by manage your time, I mean also to give equal importance to yourself. That is to try to do some things other than PhD as well. Because if you are only doing PhD 24/7, then it's highly likely that you will get burnt out. And it's always better to have also something where you can kind of relax a bit and focus. So having a good balance between life and work is quite crucial when you're doing a PhD. And some things that you probably should not expect is, first of all, money. So I have never heard this term rich PhD students ever. So it's an oxymoron. So always never expect that to get rich after doing a PhD. And it is possible that your peers would be earning more doing a job. But so PhD is never about money. It's about developing yourself. It's about learning skills, and which can later transfer to earning more money, of course, but not during the PhD. Also, PhD is not about easy answers. Even if you are very familiar with the field, maybe you have many publications in your master's in that field, even then a PhD can be very challenging. So it is never easy answers to, so it's always difficult questions and difficult answers. And in many cases, there won't be any answer at all. So be prepared for that. And finally, of course, it's a very different system than what we have been used to from class 1 to MSc final semester. Is it's not some coursework where we solve some exams, give some assignments, maybe do some projects, and we get a final grade. It is definitely not like that. It's very different. And also this competitive thing we have usually with our peers is a very bad thing to have in this case. Especially in this case, it's always bad, because when you're in a group, you're working with these people. They are not your competitors. They are your co-workers. So that you are going towards a common goal. So everyone wins. You should think in that way. It's not like someone wins, that means I lose. So this kind of mentality that many times come from conventional courses, doing conventional courses, I think should be really done away with when we are doing a PhD. Yes, so this is my take on how to prepare for a PhD. And as I frame this whole presentation in the form of various questions, I would really expect a lot of questions from you as well, because I might have not covered many aspects which you want to discuss about. So yeah, this is the time for that. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Atreya, for the wonderful and informative talk. We do have a lot of questions in the chat box, so let's get to that. Okay, first question is from Vishesh. He asks, how much are we allowed to deviate or evolve around our master's thesis in choosing or applying for a PhD position?
Okay, so I can first start with telling my experience a bit and then a general thing. So what I worked on my master thesis was really on material science to fabricate actual material in clean rooms and then do electrical measurements on those to find various properties. And what I'm doing PhD now is essentially simulation, and there is no experimentation or fabrication right now. So in terms of methodology, it can vary quite a lot. And it's, I think, more about the motivation of the student that gets to the professor as to how much he's motivated to. Yes, I really love programming even when I was doing fabrication. That's why my professor thought that I would be a good match for this position. So yeah, I think depending on the professor, it's always depending on the professor, but there is usually quite a lot of room to deviate from your what you have done your master thesis on. Because I also know many people who have done their master thesis on completely different topics compared to what they're doing their PhD on. So I think it's more about the motivation or how you think about research, these things which matter to the supervisor. Because anyway, like I said, PhD is a steep learning curve and you're always learning many things. So if you're not from that background, you just have to learn a bit more. That's it. So yeah, you are allowed to deviate somewhat from your master thesis, indeed.
Okay, next, we have a question from Shantali. She asks, tell me something about being able to go abroad for a PhD. I think you answered this question.
Yes, I think so. Mhm.
Okay, but Shantali, if you specifically want to ask something, you can unmute yourself or write it in the chat box. So, meanwhile, let's move on to the next question. We have a question from Rahul Devarakonda. He asks, is it possible to shift from theoretical to experimental topics with the person having done some advanced lab courses and vice versa?
Yes, I think I kind of answered a bit about this in my last question. So it is definitely possible, but I would say it depends on the professor as well as the motivation of the student in that case. So yeah, motivation actually plays a huge role in how a PhD project comes into play. So I think it can even be very good if you are doing your masters and everything in something theory, and then you are doing something experimental, because then you bring that theoretical perspective to the whole thing. And maybe it is possible that you do some theory to connect the experiments with some physics or whatever you're doing. So in many cases, I think that is a very good thing to have. Yeah, so it is definitely possible to shift.
Okay, we have two similar questions from Dhriti and Moitril.
Okay.
So, Dhriti asks what kind of background one should have, and Moitril asks what kind of coursework does one usually do in a PhD?
Okay, so Dhriti's question, so should one have as in, so I think I understand the question. So if you already know you want to do a PhD, then it's highly recommended that your master program has some kind of research in it as well. That is usually the case, I think, in most universities. So you really need to think of a background like that, where you have some kind of research experience, because although it does not matter extremely, but if you have some research experience versus you do not have any research experience, that makes, I think, some amount of difference as well, because at least you know how to go to Google to maybe find a paper, or you know that how to make some figures or things like that, which are a part of research. So you're maybe a bit ahead of someone who has not done any research at all. So if for the professor who is selecting the person, it comes, everything is equal between you and that person, and you have a bit more research experience than him or her, then you might get the position. So you should really aim for a background which prepares you for a PhD. If you want to do a PhD, you know already you want to do a PhD. And Moitreo, what kind of coursework? So that also depends on the university. But what I've heard from my friends is it's basically takes all the basic physics and takes you to advanced levels. I don't know about other subjects in this matter. I'm only talking about physics. So yeah, you do that kind of courses, and also there are some parts where you can specialize towards your direction. So maybe you take statistical mechanics, quantum mechanics, electrodynamics, classical mechanics, and then if you're going to do a PhD in condensed matter, then you take a special condensed matter course, or maybe a special cosmology course if you're going towards cosmology. So this kind of courseworks are usually given in PhD. So you start from a very broad level, and you have the opportunity usually to narrow it down towards your own topic. And if you're already selected to the PhD program, you know the professor with whom you are going to work. That person will also suggest you which courses to take and what things would be useful for the PhD. Yeah.
Okay, next we have a question from Arif. So Arif asks that if someone has some mental health issues, or he or she can't take any much pressure, so should he or she go for a PhD, even if he has interest or not?
Okay. Uh, I understand this question. So I think this is not a determining factor at all in if you can do a PhD or not. But what is very important is for your supervisor to know about this, that person knows from the very beginning that you are motivated, you're interested, but you might have some kind of health issue, which can be mental, physical, both, then that can interfere with your work. So if that person, if the supervisor is okay with that and he or she knows how to handle it, I don't think this is an issue per se. So what matters is just your motivation, all, and if you really want to do this or not. Although, like, I talked a lot about stress and everything, but it's also a lot of fun as well. You really have good time. You meet a lot of people from different countries, and yeah, it's quite a amazing experience as well overall. So that's why I would say it's not really a very big deal, Arif. You can really go forward with a PhD, I think. Yes.
Next, we have another question from Vishesh. He asks how to choose one with respect to a good person and a successful supervisor.
See, like I think I mentioned in one of the slides that do not go for the fame. So you should not look it from that perspective. I think this should be a parameter which should not contribute at all to your decision when choosing a supervisor. What you should look at is the other aspects. Is this person's work matching with mine? How this person works, is it matching with me? And if he's being able, if his sensibilities on interests match with you, I think you should look at it from that point of view. Also, it's not about being a good person or not. I think that is also student dependent. So in there, I think it really boils down to what will make you the most efficient PhD student. I think you should think from that perspective. If does this person have these traits which helps me to do a PhD or not? So if you're a PhD student who really likes to be independent, so you will not like a supervisor who is always trying to control you and things like that. So you really need to think from your point of view, what will maximize your research output. I think that is the way you would like to think about this problem.
So Mosam asks, does the number of students the supervisor has supervised can be an indication of how good the supervisor is?
So number of students so the total number of students, if you consider, I think it's a function. It's a monotonically increasing function of how long the supervisor has been doing research, right? So I don't. So always the more senior professors will have more number of students. So that is not an indicator of how that person is, I think. And in general, also the number is not a good metric at all, because it also depends on the kind of work someone is doing. And in some labs it happens that there is one supervisor, many postdocs, and then many PhD students. And these postdocs are also kind of supervising the PhD students and such. So the actual professor has a huge number of students, but has a very good management system in this way. And it can also be the other way around, that the supervisor really likes to talk individually with the student. So he only has 2 or 3 students always, and the nature of work is maybe like that. So yeah, I don't think this is also the correct way of knowing if a supervisor is good or not. That's my take on this.
Next, we have questions from Digonto and Shubhankar. Digonto asks, how much valuable is MSc project work, and how can I form a good SOP when I don't know much about the field or have no prior research experience? And Shubhankar also asks us very similar question. Should project work in MSc be related with PhD topic?
Okay. So first question was, how much valuable is MSc project work? So valuable in the context of PhD, I think you mean. So it is important, but I won't say it is the only sole determining factor. It's, if you have a publication in your master's, it does not count a lot. It's a good thing to have, of course, but it does not count. Like if you have a publication, it does not mean you will always get the position. It also is about how you did the work, how much you feel motivated about it, and all these things, which I think the supervisor will understand if the person takes an interview. So it's valuable, but I would say it's more, you should think more about how you feel about the whole thing. That matters. And also that connects with the second question you asked. So how can you write a good statement of purpose? Because so in statement of purpose, it's not only you write about the field, you also write about yourself and why you feel interested. So you're applying for a position. That means there is some impetus you have towards it, right? So you just write that. So my approach to writing an SOP is basically to be very honest, because in any way, if I don't have the proper motivation or proper background, then isn't it better to not do that PhD position at all? So I think the best way to go here is to be very honest. That so it can be the case that you don't know exactly that, but you have studied this, you have worked on this, and because of this and that reason, you find this interesting, and you can just write that in the SOP. And maybe also read a bit about the new field and what aspects of it attract you the most. I think in my mail there was also a line like that where I said that this connection between these two fields, or this interdisciplinary nature of this field, really attracts me. So you just tell the person about that, and you just in your SOP write that I don't have prior research experience in this, but because of this reason, I am motivated for this. So I think that is always my suggestion to anyone who is writing an SOP, and I've always written an SOP like that. And Shubhankar's question, should project work So yeah, like I think I mentioned it already twice that it really does not matter too much if the field is related or not. Like it can matter in some cases. Maybe if you're continuing a MSc work to a PhD in the same lab, then it can matter. If it's of course then you're doing the same topic, so of course it matters. But if you're shifting a lab and everything, it doesn't matter too much in those cases. What matters is your approaches and how you learn to think during MSc. Yeah.
Okay, next we have a question from Marcel. So he asks, what is the difference between dissertation, project, and thesis?
Okay, I think this is more a semantic question. So dissertation and thesis, I think essentially means the same. Like it's in different countries say it in different ways, and project is a more general thing. So during a PhD, you do different projects. So basically some sub questions or different questions you are trying to answer for a particular um broad problem. Because when you're doing a PhD, it's usually not a very specific question. Like you have this material, you want to understand this very particular property at this temperature. It's never that. It's so one project can be studying the transport properties under magnetic field. Another project can be studying the electronic properties under different temperatures. So this project is something a bit different, which is one fixed sub question that you follow during a PhD or during your master's or anything. Project is, I think, more like that. Yeah.
Okay, next Vishesh asks, when should we mail for a PhD position? Usually, people apply or mail during January or February, but the master's thesis is just half finished, right?
Yes. So I think, yeah, you're completely right. Like January, February, March, these are the time. January might be a bit early, but yeah, anyway, February is kind of the correct time to start mailing professors. Yeah, and also I think everyone knows who is receiving the mail that you are halfway in your master thesis. So it does not, this person is already knowing about it. So he will also tell you maybe later when you are finished with the thesis, you send it to him or her. And that's how everything goes. I think it's not about finishing your thesis. It's the work you are doing and things like that. I guess that matters. So even if you're halfway, it's okay.
Next, we have a question from Shomadi. Is knowing and speaking English enough for countries in Europe? In every country is in Europe.
So for the research work in Europe, every country does it in English. So just for the research, it is sufficient, of course. But like average, like in general, convenience when you're living in somewhere in Europe can vary a lot depending upon the country. So for instance, in Netherlands, it was very smooth just knowing English. And in France, it's not so easy. So depending upon the country, your experience can vary. But for the research purpose, for your university work, it is sufficient. Yes.
We have a question from Bohemian, but uh, you can unmute yourself and ask in English or write it in the chat box. So moving on to the next question from Mosel, what type of questions they generally ask in an interview?
Okay, so the questions they ask, it will not be, I can first say what kind of question they will never ask. They will never ask very detailed things like if you're doing a particle physics, they will never ask the mass of proton or things like that. They will more try to learn about you, about how you approach research, what you have done so far, what you find interesting. And maybe if you're giving a presentation and they are asking, that's usually the norm. When it's the interview means you give a presentation about your previous work or your master thesis work, and they ask you questions from your presentation. So just they can be normal questions that you get from a presentation, or they can be some question that tests how you think about a certain problem. So say there was an aspect of your this presentation which connects to the PhD project that you're applying for, then a question can come that it is how you can link these two, or something along those lines. And I think it's at least in my experience and also what I have heard, it's mostly about this kind of research, how it tests your research merits than anything else. So like how you are thinking about a problem, or how much you feel motivated about something. I think the questions usually go along these lines. So yeah.
Okay, next we
Also something maybe I can add is that they want to know why you have applied to that university, that group, or if you will feel comfortable doing a PhD in a different institute, different country. Things like that also might come up.
okay. Next we have two questions. I think we have answered both of them. One is from Shagnik. When do we start mailing the supervisors, and how do you get over those mental tolls in PhD? And another is from Mosam. If someone is wishing to do a PhD in some area in astrophysics, should he or she go for masters in astrophysics rather than masters in physics? So I think you answered both of these questions.
Yeah, I think Shagnik's second question, how do you get over this mental tolls in PhD? I think I kind of emphasize this too much, but also it is very satisfying as an experience, PhD. So it's not always about mental tools. I think this teaches a bit more about life itself, that even in life we have some stressful situations and things. Maybe in PhD, it comes in a very short period of time, all these things. But we gradually, I think, if we are motivated enough for the topic, if we think that at the end of the day I'm doing interesting stuff, then I will get over this gradually. Like there's no precise prescription for how to get over this. It depends on the person, but I think in the end it boils down if you really want to move forward or not. So yeah. Also, Mosam's question, I think I have not answered this one. So if someone is wishing to do, so this person already knows that the person wants to do a PhD in astrophysics, then I think definitely I would recommend the person to go for astrophysics masters. But that person has to be really sure that he or she wants to do PhD in astrophysics. Only then I would recommend that. But yeah, it's definitely a good thing to go in the same direction. Yeah.
Okay. Next, we have a question from Shubhankar. What are the things which would be helpful in interview? Do number of projects in MSc matters?
So number of projects in MSc is usually one for most of the people. So I won't say the number, quantity matters. I think quality matters in that case. And what are the things which would be helpful in interview? I think knowing your presentation very well is the first thing you should have. Really know very well what you're presenting, every bit of it, and you must be able to defend questions about it, and also in the light of your PhD project. Also, the what is the project about? You should know about it, and preparing yourself for those kind of things is the most helpful, I think, when you are going for an interview. Uh, but also interviews in India for integrated PhD or PhD, those are a bit different. They ask, sorry, I think I answered all these questions from a perspective of about interviews about Europe or United States, but in India, they're, I think, mostly more inclined on the academic side, where they maybe give you a Schrodinger equation and ask you to calculate the transmission coefficient, things like this, which I personally also got. So yeah, it really depends, I guess, what kind of interviews you're giving. If it's an interview where you're presenting your work, then prepare for the in the context of that work, all kinds of questions. But if it's a normal interview in TIFR or ICTS or IISc, then know your bachelor's and master's materials well. That is my suggestion.
Okay, next we have a question from Shavni. Do the universities expect us to have at least one publication in MSc before starting PhD? So I guess it
No,
doesn't really matter.
I think they don't expect.
Yeah,
They never expect it.
it helps, but it's not necessary.
Yes, yes. And also if there is one, it's not that it helps a lot. It kind of maybe gives you an edge because it shows you have written a paper. That means you have gone through many articles, you have done some amount of work. So that shows something, but it's not like the end of the world if you have not any publication. So yeah.
Okay. Next question is from Holsholjo. Is it possible to change our supervisor if needed after starting a PhD?
So it actually depends on the university where you are doing. But I think typically it is possible. Like it's of course very non-ideal. There will be a lot of delay in your whole thing. But I have seen cases where there has been changes of supervisors. So that is the case. And also in many places in India, you have this opportunity to do some projects before you actually start the PhD. For instance, in IUCA, they have this thing in when someone starts a PhD, there's this coursework, and in the final period of the coursework, they do some projects with some professors, and it is there that both the professor and the students they choose each other for the PhD because of course it's a longer commitment. So if someone wants to change, they can change at that point. So yeah.
Okay, before moving on to the next question, I would like to ask you to please, uh, we please not write any more questions in the chat box because we are running out of time. So Shantani asks,
So I have something to say here. So
okay,
if anyone has any questions, you can mail me, or if you know me over Facebook or LinkedIn or WhatsApp, you can even ask me anything there. So yeah,
okay.
yeah, go
So
ahead.
Shantani asks, if someone chooses wrong professor as supervisor, will that reflect on the thesis vigorously? And there's also a second part, and will a strong CV like having good publications reflect on being selected for the PhD position or the personal mail, and if selected then the interview will do the whole?
So the first one, I think if you choose the wrong supervisor or professor, it will definitely reflect on the thesis, I think. Although maybe it depends on the on your discipline as well to an extent. So for science things, I think it matters a lot because like the supervisor student interaction is very crucial for the whole endeavor and how everything works. If that is bad, then it reflects on the thesis. But I am not very aware of how the situation is in humanities. As far as I understand, there is a bit more of autonomy in that case, that students can um, do the research work by themselves a lot more. And that is just how the field is. So in that case, there can be a possibility that even then the thesis is good. But of course, I can say for sure it definitely has an effect if your supervisor is good for you or not. It will have an effect even then, I think. And a strong CV, I think CV is just a part of the whole evaluation process. So, and I don't think it has the majority of the thing. So it's like the CV, the mail, and all these things is kind of the first impression. So this person knows that you have, okay, this is your background, this is how you approached me. So now okay, now you have piqued my interest, I want to know more about you. I will have an interview with you, or I will ask you some things more. Maybe I'll ask you to read something and tell me about it, things like this. So having a strong CV, writing a good mail, all these I think are important as first impressions. So yeah, that then the interview and all these things, all the interactions, they are much more important and more uh, illuminating. Yeah.
So we do have a few more questions, but you have answered most of them. So I'll just filter out one question and then move on to Ognigo, who has been raising his hand for quite a long time. So
Okay.
Vinod asked, you said it's important to have information about topic and supervisor, especially if your background is different. If an MSc person is interested in interdisciplinary fields like climate change, environmental engineering, water research, how does he goes out about it?
Okay. So the question is interested in okay. So how does he go about it? Is basically first of all, I would say to try to do something in this field. So say you have done a MSc in physics and you're interested in climate change and how physics can help. There is a very interesting overlap of physics and climate science. So if you the best way to go about is to do a project in that first of all, before even going for a PhD, because I think that's a huge commitment that you have not done any project or anything in a topic and you want to just know the names or maybe a bit and you want to go for it. Maybe okay, just clear all these things. Yeah. um Sorry, the best way to go about is I think is to do a project which will give you much more information than reading any amount of paper or anything. So this is I think how you go about it, and then you are in contact with a person who knows about the field. Maybe he or she will give you suggestion, or you will know about other scientists on that field and you will approach them. I think when you are really going from physics, more pure physics background to an interdisciplinary way, you need to approach it in this way. Yeah.
Okay, Ognivo, you can go ahead.
Okay, Atreya, thanks for the wonderful talk. So I had a question. What is the difference between a 3-year PhD program and a 5 or 6 years PhD program?
Yeah, that's I think quite good question and needs some clarification as well. So if you look at these different programs, which are 3 years or 6-7 years, they are very different in nature. So in the United States, when you do a 6 or 7 year PhD, if you look at the thesis title or things like this, they're quite broad. So during this whole time, you're allowed to learn about the whole thing. You can design your own way of interpreting this topic, and you can really take it quite far from where it started, or really go into any direction or any look into any aspect of it that you want. And 6-7 years can really do that in that duration. And in contrast to that, the projects that are offered for 3 to 4 years, they are much less broad. They are more specific. You really know where you are starting from. And in many cases, it happens that there's already some work going on and it needs to be continued or it needs to be taken in some other direction. That becomes a PhD project. So you really know what is the initial point, and you are taking it from there and you are taking it forward, and you're learning about the whole thing, and maybe in later years you can take it to other directions, but you know at least where you're starting from. Whereas when you're doing a longer period of PhD, it can be a project that is already that has not been done at all. So the first person approaching this thing can, and that is the, and then you can take more time to explore and get to know about it. As to which of them is better, that is I would say a very deeply person dependent thing. So one thing is for sure, if you stay in academia, the research you do in your PhD is the worst research you will ever do. So it will only get better. So if you just want to get the feel of the PhD and complete it and go forward in academia, in those cases you can go for a 3-4 year PhD. But you really, if you want to really go into some particular thing quite in a deep way, I think that those cases you can go for a 6-7 years. So it really, I think, this I said just for me, I think It is up to you how you interpret the whole thing. But in any case, this the first thing that I said about how they are different, that I think is in general always true. So really want to think as to how you look at your academic career to evolve, basically.
Okay, my question was a bit broad in the sense that suppose a student does a 3-year PhD and
Mm-hmm.
another student does a 6-year or 7-year PhD. So
Right.
does that affect on his future? For example, if someone, I mean, tries to apply for a postdoc position or a faculty position. So, I mean, does it matter that whether they have done a 3-year PhD program or a 5-6-year PhD program?
Um, to be honest and fair, I don't have a very particular answer to this. Although I think at least this is my inclination to the answer to your question. That also depends on the place where you are applying for this position. Say it's in a country where it's usual to have a PhD for 3 years, and you already have a 3-year PhD, you have another postdoc, and you're applying for a position. I think that's perfectly normal. But on the other hand, say it's the United States where the norm there is to do a PhD for 6-7 years. You are coming from Europe from a 3-year PhD. I don't think they will entertain your job, like just a direct faculty position, if you just go directly from a PhD to that. So this is my thought on this, although I'm not very sure about how the whole thing goes. And it's possible that in 3 years you have done terrific research and in some good university they were going to give you a faculty position. That's, I think, definitely possible as well. So I think
So, yeah.
depends on the place.
So actually, I mean, the thesis or the number of publications, they are more important, like how many time you have allotted for the PhD, right?
Also that, yeah, I mean, for the countries where they have 3 years of PhD, it's not mandated. It's not mandatory in many places, but it's not also expected that you will definitely do publication. Like even there are, even for 4-year PhDs, the PhD student can graduate without any publication. So yeah, it's not that kind of, there's no threshold or anything like that, I guess, for the number of papers. Did that answer?
Yeah, I think, yeah. Doipan, you can go ahead, or Auditro, you can just address the question to anyone else.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Yeah, Atreya, am I audible?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, yeah, thanks for the great talk. So my question is regarding the institute. So you, of course, mentioned how important it is to select a supervisor. So I would like to ask how crucial it is for to select a particular institute. As you know, there are multiple factors. So how would you address that?
I would say the order should be like this: that like the topic and supervisor are the most important things. I think after that comes the institute. Not so it's not how I would approach going for some position is to look at the topic as well as the supervisor and his work, and not the university, because there can be maybe in a very small country, very not so well-known university, one researcher who does really good job and whose work really matches with you. It can also happen the other way, that it's maybe top 5 university. There's a very famous department, but this person, there's a person who is interested in you, but he does not, his work does not match with you, or also maybe he does not do that great work. So in that way, like the institute can be a bit misleading, although there is a correlation, of course, like good institute has good researchers. So I personally would suggest to not be too overwhelmed by the prestige of a university or institute.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, before ending the session, we will just allow 2 more questions. One is from Abul. He asks, what is the amount of scholarship one usually get per PhD in USA or Europe?
It varies so much. I don't think I can give a very good answer. Although I can say this for certain that the amount, most of the countries, what they give is sufficient to survive in that country. So although I said you won't be rich, you also won't be poor. So yeah, just if you don't have any other issues like health or anything, I think even in the United States, you can survive quite well with what they offer as a scholarship. And also in Europe, and in Europe, there's this thing that how they calculate the salary is also based on the living cost. So you will always be able to survive well in any, in whatever be the amount usually. So if it's a full-time PhD, then they already know you cannot do another job other than your PhD. So they will pay you that amount that is sufficient.
Okay. So you talked about the importance of master's projects in getting a PhD in abroad. Siddharth asks, how does the grades in masters matter to get a PhD in abroad?
Well, grades don't really speak a lot about how you are as a PhD student. So, because how you do research is not very much tied with how good you are as a student, although there might be some slight positive correlation. So the approach I have seen that they take here is that if you have a reasonably good grade, that is good enough. I mean, anything greater than or equal to 8 is good enough for them, I think. But if you have say 9 or 10, that won't mean that you have an automatic chance of getting a PhD. You still have to really show your thing, and recommendation, your research experience, all these things count much more than your grade. It's yeah, of course, if you have a very low grade, then that will affect. But there can be even some cases where if you have low grade because of some reason, maybe the person who is recommending you, the person will write why that was the case, and that cannot be a big issue. So bottom line is grade is not a very crucial factor.
Okay, with that, I think we should end our Q&A session. So let's thank the speaker.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Akshada, for the wonderful talk. It was very informative, and thank you everyone for asking such wonderful questions, and thanks for coming into this colloquium. Thank you.
Yeah, see you.
Actually, there is one question about Indian Physics Society, this physicist.
Yeah, please, sure, go ahead.
Like, what are the activities that we are doing in this society? Like, I just recently became a